I'm Daniele Pizzolli from CreateNet, and I started this session talking about orchestration of Docker-based application hosted on FIWARE Lab, FIWARE Cloud, and later Kenneth Nagin from IBM Haifa will follow on the same topic. Maybe you know about the FIWARE Lab. Can you raise your hand if you know about the FIWARE Lab? So at least half of the people know. How many of you have an account on the FIWARE Lab and use it? Okay, half of the people. Okay. I will talk about installing Rancher and using it on the FIWARE Lab. How many of you knows Rancher? Okay, only a few people. Basically, Rancher is advertised as a platform for operating Docker in production. You install Rancher, and then you can use it in order to span instances of your application using Docker and a lot of stuff that we will see. The FIWARE Lab is a working instance of FIWARE available for experimentation, as they advertise on the first line. And basically, it's an OpenStack custom application where you have the generics enabled and so on, as you should know because you are at the FIWARE Summit. And it requires some knowledge in order to install your application, and we will see into this session how to do it. I will show you the poor man's installation because it requires few steps, so maybe if you are interested, you can replicate it. And also I want to highlight some issues I had because more or less all of these are new technologies, so there is a lot of instability. But if you join the trend early, you can gain the advantage to be early. The first, yes, I don't know if you can see the numbers of the ports, but anyway, usually when you start your instances on the FIWARE Lab, you need to set up some security groups and rules, especially to the open port, and you need, in order to Rancher communicate between their host, to set up a couple of ports. Then you need at least one Rancher server and one Rancher node. I highlight there the server and then the node. I also have the server with a public IP, so I can reach the server from my working station. And those are the details of one node that's basically, oops, sorry. You can see that we have 3 security groups, one for the Rancher network, one for the SSH, and one for the web, basically the managing stuff. So once we have those server and one node at least instantiated on the FIWARE Lab, we can start to install Rancher. We need a user and the IP of the server. I use the public IP of the server. Then usually you should accept the SSH key of the host. Maybe it's better to check it, but we skip about the security right now. You have also to install Docker because it's not installed by default with the latest version of the FIWARE Lab. Of course, we skip also the security consideration of running piping commands from the network directly into a shell. And then finally, you can install the Rancher server with this command line that basically spans a Docker instance with the Rancher server, and you have two options. One without the specified version, so basically take the latest one, and one that is known to work on the FIWARE Lab. I use the latest one. Now I will show you a quick tour of the Rancher web interface, especially used for Docker Swarm. When you use Rancher, basically you can set up few hosts to work with, and you can choose between Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, and Mesos. So you can experiment quickly with different type of cloud orchestration. We choose Swarm because also we have a generic enables that Kenneth will speak later about into the FIWARE Lab. I have not tried yet, but is on the plan. So the first thing to do when you have a Rancher instance is to enable the authorization management and change the default password, because somebody can use it in order to basically take advantage of your infrastructure. Then you should add an environment. As I said, you can choose between Mesos, Kubernetes, Swarm, and also Cattle, that is basically the orchestration built in with Rancher. We choose Swarm, as I said, because there is also a generic enable that may work with Swarm, with Rancher. Then you have to add an host, and you can add an host basically following the instruction. And I forgot to put the relevant. Anyway, you basically copy an SSH command into your host that contains the IP of the management server and a token that will enable the host to be managed by the Rancher server. What you need on the host, you need only basically a modern version of Docker installed. It can be any host, Linux host. And then it starts working for a little. You should wait a few minutes. And then you will see basically interface showing that the host was registered and is up as a host available for the Swarm environment. Then you had a stack that basically is your application Docker compose file. You see the optional Docker compose YAML file. I took for this example, because we are at the FIWARE Summit, the FIWARE Tour application. That is a quite complex application because it, I think, span out 6 or 8 services. So after you click run, you will see a panel when every line there is basically a Docker instance that will run some components of your application. You see the ports and the names of the application and so on. You see also the error there, but it will be fixed later. You see that some instance during the installation process will be stopped and then restarted automatically by the basically Docker Compose stuff, and you will see graphically. And then when you have, after a few minutes, when everything is set up, you see that all instances are running. You can go back and you can check for each instance what is the current status of the networking, CPU, and so have some nice graph of what is going on of your instances. Then you have an interface that with your Docker Compose if you want to review it, and a nice interface showing the relation between your machines. I don't think you are able to read the machines' names, but basically this map to the list of the we saw before in the table. So you have a quick graphical information. You see also this error line that is not well integrated into the graphics. And basically, this is a sign that Rancher is not really feature complete, or some glitches show from time to time into the graphical interfaces. I would mention that there are a lot of applications already packaged that you can try with Rancher. For example, this is the classical WordPress installation. So you can just install a Rancher and then try the application just by basically adding the application into a new stack, and maybe by filling some parameters like the administration user and password and so on. What is the interesting part is that this is a journey that I started only a few weeks ago, and sometimes Ranchers works on the FIWARE Lab, sometimes not. I have yet to figure out the reason, because basically you have to be both a Rancher, a Docker, and FIWARE Lab expert in order to debug the issue. But when it works, it's quite easy to explore the orchestration of services. What I want to do in the next future is really to check the stability of Rancher, because it's a young project. As is written there are more than 1,000 issues opened on their GitHub projects, but more than 5,000 are already closed. So it's a very active project. So if something doesn't work, it might be fixed just in a few weeks. Of course, what I can say is that because all the Docker stuff, Rancher, and so on are pretty young projects, maybe what is present in a version will not be present into the next one. So you should have a backup plan of your orchestration tools, because features are added and features are deprecated in a quick time. What can be next regarding to the FIWARE Lab is that basically it's possible to add FIWARE node as a machine driver. That basically it's a way to say that instead of adding each host manually in order to be managed to Rancher, basically Rancher take care of spawning new nodes automatically when you need to instantiate new virtual machine. And I will show you why I not choose to do this as a first option now. And another thing that could be interesting is to create a plugin in order to use the Docker generic enable as a machine driver. And what's next, I don't know, is up to us, up to the community to keep the advantage of Rancher, of the FIWARE Lab. The reason I didn't use the automatic way to manage the FIWARE Lab by Rancher is that you need to fill a form manually with all this data. And this is only the first page. And you have to type every one by hand. And this is the second page. And so this is an indication that some part is still role. So you know that a lot of stuff just need the endpoint, your password of a token, and figure out all how to fill those stuff. But to take all this information from the FIWARE Lab take more time than just copy and paste the shell line in order to join a single node to do some testing. I think that could be easy to integrate the autofilling of this stuff. So maybe this can be a little project in order to get better integration between Rancher and the FIWARE Lab. That's all from my presentation. If you have a question, I'm happy to take it. Or if not, I will leave the floor to Kenneth. So the question is why I didn't use Rancher OS as I'm not aware that it's an option on the FIWARE Lab. Okay. So, okay. Sorry, I repeat the question. Why I didn't use the Rancher OS? So is available on the Spain node as a instance. You can confirm it. Okay. Nobody can confirm it. The question is why I didn't use Ansible for deployment, because it was just a quick test in order to gain some understanding on what is Rancher and how it can be integrated on the FIWARE Lab. I plan to eventually do some scripting in order to get this automatically installed on the FIWARE Lab. Thanks. Okay, thank you everybody. And I will give room to Kenneth. Okay. You can try it in a few. Oh, you have the mic?
Yeah. What do I do?
Okay.
Okay.
Up and down.
Up and down. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. I'm going to talk about the FIWARE Docker container service. Okay. The idea of this was we wanted to create a service that you could run Docker on the FIWARE Lab without having to set up any of the hosts. Okay, so we essentially give you a Swarm cluster, and all you have to do is from your Docker client, you have to set up Docker on your local host machine, and from there you can just work with Docker like you would normally. That's the whole idea. What we did do is we created a multi-tenant swarm for you, so that everybody that uses the service, it's a service, is sharing the underlying infrastructure. The good thing here is that you don't have to know anything about Docker or Swarm or clusters or anything like that. All you do is use the Docker API. That's the whole idea, that we've exposed the Docker API that you can use. So what did we give you? We have a Docker cluster up there. We have a key value storage and NFS. The key value storage allows us to give you an overlay network over all of the clusters, so you don't have to worry about that. And it provides you NFS that all of the clusters, if you create a volume, You create a volume. It doesn't matter where your containers are placed. By swarm, you can access it on your own. If it wasn't an overlay network, and if it was an NFS, it doesn't work like that. Swarm doesn't know anything about things, and you could put your different services, and they wouldn't be connected. Okay? But again, the beauty of it is that you, as the user, once you can use the system, you simply use your Docker client and use Docker the way you normally would use it. Okay? Oh, the other thing that I didn't say is, the authorization is based on Keystone. So based on your ID that you use to get access to everything else on the FIWARE Lab, it's the same login, essentially. And that's okay. So what this slide is I want to first, before I go, jump ahead to what I think is the interesting part, which is the overlay network. NFS, I want to have a basic concept. We have two basic concepts. It's a multi-tenant. Swarm is not multi-tenant. We made it multi-tenant. Docker is not multi-tenant. We made it multi-tenant. So we give you multi-tenant isolation. Multi-tenant isolation means that tenant A doesn't know anything about tenant B, can't access, can't see it, can't touch it. Multi-tenant name scoping means that you can use the same name, one tenant can use the same name for something, and another tenant can use that same name, and it doesn't get confused. And so this is the picture of you have container red, and it doesn't know anything, and you're all sharing the same resources. Okay, so, I keep going back, okay? Okay, so just to prove it, this is a slide of multi-tenant isolation. We have tenant 1, and this set Docker conf makes it easy because we use the Keystone tokens. You don't have to understand how we do it, but you run this set Docker conf, and it sets up your environment after you give it a password and your user ID. Okay, so this tenant runs this trivial container that creates a loop, and then you see when Docker, and then it looks at it, it runs it, but then the other user does a PS and he doesn't see it, and he runs his, he creates his, and then they don't conflict with each other. So you have two tenants that are creating things, they don't see each other's stuff, and they just run side by side and don't know anything about each other. Okay, so tenant 1 can remove his containers, and then the tenant 1 is not allowed to remove a container of another. It'll get a not authorized if it tries to go and touch somebody else's tenants, even if it looked over and it figured out or did it by mistake. And tenant 1 and tenant 2, they view after they remove, they have different views of things, but neither one knows about the other. Okay. The name scoping business is that they can use the same name. So we have the same name loop. He starts a same name loop. That's when the naming convention. He starts his. They both use the same names, but they're different containers. And finally, let's see. Oh, okay. This is just sort of an understanding of how you would use this, okay? Tenants, more than one user can belong to a tenant in Keystone, okay? That's something sometimes people miss. That means that if you create a tenant, and any one of you can create a tenant, you just go up on the GUI, on the cloud portal, you can create an organization, that's a tenant, okay? And you can have people share that name. And so this is just an example of two users, user 3 and user 2 have this, are actually belong to the same tenant. And so you could share resources with another user. Okay, now here comes the interesting part. That's just the beginning. The whole idea of that is that previously that any one of you can get on this thing. It's easy. You don't have to do any setup of Swarm or anything like that. And you can use it, and it's multi-tenant, and you have isolation. Now, the interesting thing is that it's a cluster, and we've created an overlay network on it, and we also have NFS. And everything I said about multi-tenant isolation and name scoping is true for the network that we created. So that means that tenant A can create an overlay network, and tenant B can create an overlay network. They're different networks. They can't see each other, and they can use the same name for their networks. Same thing for NFS. You can create a volume that you can store, and that gives you persistence and a distributed file system over the whole cluster. And you get all that, and it's all isolated for you. Okay, this is just a cute picture that I took off about what is an overlay network and an NFS volumes. Okay, so most people do not work with Docker command line. They work with Docker Compose. So I wanted to focus in on how you would use Docker Compose and take advantage of this. Okay, so here is how, if you go on and look at all the stuff that's up on Docker, on the Docker Hub, and you look at FiWARE stuff, you'll see that everybody is working with links and volumes from, or they don't even use volume froms, okay? This is, the problem with this is, and this is using Orion, and how you would take Orion using links, and you have Orion, and it links to its MongoDB, and then if they want persistence, they use volume from here, and that points to the data, which means that if you take down Mongo or Orion, or both, you take them down and then bring them up, you'll still have your data on the volume from. Okay? Nice. But not so nice. The problem with that is, one, is that all of this implies that everything is running on the same Docker host machine. Not very good, not very expandable, and certainly not good for clusters. And furthermore, Docker has said that they're deprecating links anyways, so they're eventually going to go away. So it's a bad way to work, but that's what's out there now. The service supports this because all of the FiWARE examples are using this, so I wanted something that people could use, but it's not a good way to work. Okay, so what are we saying? Go to version 2 and use overlay networks and use NFS volumes that we provide support for. So essentially you get the same thing. It's not really much more complicated. The Mongo and Orion will run on the same overlay network, but not necessarily on the same host. Same thing with the volume. The NFS volume will stay up. And essentially you get everything you want. I just want to point out a little thing that, just so that you understand. Since it's a multi-tenant service, okay, where everything is shared, and you don't want any constraints on the users coming in. So you'll notice on ports, we don't provide the host side of the port. If you know Docker, there's this little statement says, I want to expose 1026 port, okay, and I want it to be mapped to some host port, some external port, but I'll let Docker choose it. You could put on the other side the same number, 1026, which all the examples in FIWARE use, but this wouldn't be allowed because it would constrain other users, so you have to do a port, afterwards you do a port mapping, which I'll show you. This, in my opinion, is the most important slide of the presentation because it tells you how you should be creating your Docker Compose files if you use them. Yeah?
Are the network names unique?
No, they're unique for that tenant.
Oh, okay. So multiple tenants can have a front network.
Everybody, my thought was, when we were developing this, is that the whole, what is what is Docker selling? Okay, what is their thing? They're saying, create your Docker Compose file, and that Docker Compose file should work anywhere that you run it. That's what they're saying. Okay, so I can't go around telling people, or you could. I mean, that was one of our thoughts, that you could say, well, okay, so add your name there, and so that it will make it unique. Okay, but that really goes against the grain of Docker, but that is one of the things that possibly is one approach to it. Okay, same thing with the NFS volume. Okay. Okay, so what happens? This is just an example of what happens. I want to bring up this thing. I say Docker PS. I have nothing running yet. Docker volume ls, no volumes created. Docker network ls, no networks yet, okay? Because you didn't create them. Then you do Docker Compose up, and it brings up all this stuff. It creates a network, which it gives not the name front, by the way. It calls it Orion, or it calls whatever the directory that you ran it from. And it creates an NFS volume for you, brings everything up. Okay, now you take a look at it. The important thing on this side is okay, so I brought up these two containers, Mongo and Orion. There's the port mapping. That's the name of the host that it's running on. And okay. And it maps that host and that port to 1026. Okay? Then I do a Docker PS because I wanted to show you that it's running on two separate hosts, Docker host 2 and Docker host 3. Okay, it created the NFS driver. The point here is why do you see two of the same thing? Because for every host out there, Docker thinks that that's its local volume that it mounted. So if I had a cluster of 100 here, you'd see 100 repetitions. Okay, not pretty, but that's how it is. And then you have creating an overlay network without knowing anything about overlay networks. Okay, so here's a cool inspect on the network. It tells you that it's created this network 102, okay, and a private network, and that's the private network between them. Obviously, it's crossing the two hosts. Okay, so let's go and see how it works. Okay, so what I do is I get the port, and you can do that with this like nice Docker Compose. Get the port. You want the Orion port, tells you it, and then I do a curl to it. And when I first do the curl to it, there's nothing in it. Okay, that's what you'd expect. You brought up the Orion. You didn't put anything in it. Now I put something in it. Okay, and then I do the same business with the curl, and I see that it's created that stuff. Okay, then to show you that everything is persistent, I bring down everything. Docker down, it brings down everything, but it doesn't bring down the driver, the NFS driver. By the way, if you used previously the version of the YAML with version 1 that used volume from, and you did the down, you just wipe yourself out. You don't have any persistence, okay? So if you want to continue using that way, then watch out. Okay, so then I bring it back up again, and voila, I see that it persisted, the data persisted, and that's the end. And then if you want, we have all this Docker, these things on the catalog. There's on the catalog in the Academy, I have a getting started that I put in. I'm going to also put this presentation up in the Academy. The getting started tells you just what the first step is. I didn't want to really waste your time on that part, but it's really easy. You just have to have an ID, send me a note, and then I can put you on, and then you can start using the service. Questions? Yes? I'll put it up. I'll put it. What I'll do is I'll put it on after the thing. I'll put it on there's an Academy with all our presentations. It'll point to something on SlideShare. Questions? Okay. Thank you. Oh yeah.
Those are instances inside the FIWARE Lab, right?
Yes. They're running on the Spain node. But the cool thing about that, you didn't even have to have a community license to be able to use it. So you can get to use it. And it's also good for utilization. You can use it. Besides making it easy, it's good for FireWare because you use less service, less of the resources of FireWare. Okay? Oh, good. You asked the hard question. Okay. The answer is no. No. Docker is a really strange community. They're hard to develop to, and they've actually Swarm still exists, but they've moved into a new realm which they call Swarm mode, which is just bringing up Docker machines, and then they do a peer-to-peer. And so all those people that were working on Swarm, this Swarm, were sort of left up in the air. So I would like to have a better answer for you, but no, they're not interested in going this route. Any other questions? Okay. I think it probably is, but I I have a real, I only like put my mark on something that I've used, and I've only used Ubuntu. But I don't see why it wouldn't work on CoreOS. If it works on Windows, okay, certainly it's going to work on CoreOS, okay? And it does work on Windows, so. Oh, thank you.